You really think someone like you belongs out here? That's what the man said loud enough for the whole diner to hear, his eyes on her scars, his smirk curling like smoke. Could this moment spark an incredible turnaround? She didn't flinch, she just said, I've served men like you before, but in far worse places. The next morning, he didn't come back. But 300 Marines did. They weren't there for pancakes, they were there for her. Welcome to Graceful Valor Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. The sun hadn't yet risen over Harrison County, but the neon sign outside Mabel's diner glowed faint red against the morning mist. It flickered twice, then stayed lit. Inside, the clink of coffee pots and the soft scrape of a mop were the only signs of life, and in the middle of it all, quiet, focused, steady, stood Isabel Hartley. She wore a pale blue apron, her sleeves rolled just high enough to reveal part of the scars on her right arm, the rest of them stretched down from her temple, curved along her jaw, and disappeared beneath her collar. They weren't light, they weren't subtle, they looked like fire had once tried to erase her and almost succeeded. But Isabel moved like the scars didn't exist, like they weren't the first thing people saw when she brought them coffee or asked softly, cream and sugar, to most regulars. She was just the quiet one behind the counter, reliable, unchanging, no stories, no drama, always there by 5 a.m., always gone by 2 p.m. No one ever saw her leave. No one ever followed, but every now and then, a new face would walk in and pause. Maybe it was the way the scars pulled slightly at her right eye, or the way the skin on her neck didn't move quite the way it used to. Some people looked away too fast, others stared just a little too long. Children asked questions their parents weren't ready for. Isabel never blinked, she never explained, she just poured coffee and kept her hands moving. Highway 12 didn't get much traffic, especially in winter, but that morning, just after 8:30, the front bell jingled and 3 men walked in their suits, loosened ties, out-of-town confidence. They smelled like expensive cologne and talked like they owned the air around them. The diner fell a notch quieter. Isabel approached their booth, menus in one hand, coffee pot in the other. She didn't say much, just her usual gentle nod, the faint trace of a polite smile as she leaned forward to pour the first cup. The largest man, maybe mid-40s, thick watch, louder than necessary, paused, his eyes locked on her face, then her arm, and he laughed, loud, sharp, mean. You really think someone like you belongs out here? Forks froze midair, a spoon clattered somewhere near booth 7. Isabel didn't flinch, the man chuckled, motioning to her scars. I mean, come on, wouldn't dishwashing in the back be more appropriate? His friends chuckled nervously, no one else did. The cook stopped flipping pancakes, the old couple by the window looked away, even the trucker by the jukebox, who always asked for an extra hash brown, stared into his coffee. The diner held its breath. Isabel stood still, then she looked him in the eye, voice calm, tone even. I've served men like you before, she said, but in far worse places. The words dropped like lead into the silence. The man blinked, clearly not expecting a response. His friend cleared his throat. The third guy suddenly found his phone very interesting, but the damage was done. The room didn't move, and Isabel, she simply turned away and kept pouring coffee at the next table. Could this brave stand change her fate? A few moments later, a truck driver named Cal Henson, stood up, left a $10 bill beside his unfinished eggs, and walked out without a word. The next customer, an older man in a Marine Corps cap, nodded to her silently, and pressed a 20 into the edge of the table. His eyes met hers for just a second, and in that second, Isabel saw it, the look, not pity, recognition. She didn't say thank you, he didn't need it. Behind the counter, Margaret Benson, the owner, had been watching everything. She stepped closer, concern written in every line of her weathered face. You all right, Izzy? She asked quietly. Isabel didn't look up, just folded napkins with calm precision. I'm fine, she said. I've dealt with worse in Fallujah. Margaret's jaw tightened. You don't have to take their order. I can. No need, Isabel said. Some people fear what they don't understand. It's not my job to teach them. She picked up the coffee pot again, hands steady. Back at the booth, the 3 men had grown quiet, their voices low, their eyes avoided the counter. They paid in cash and left quickly. They didn't leave a tip, but others did. A bouquet showed up later that day, no note, just laid beside the register. That night, after the last table had cleared and the red open sign blinked off, Isabel stood alone in the diner. She wiped down the counter, swept the floors, and as she turned off the lights, she didn't know what had happened online, didn't know that someone had posted the story, didn't know it had already been shared over 100 times, first by a stranger, then by a veterans group, then by hundreds more. She didn't know, but the world was already moving, and by morning, the world would remember her not as the woman with the scars, but as the one who stood tall. Anyway, the next morning came just like any other. The sky was still heavy with dawn mist, the cold clung to the pavement, the windows of Mabel's diner fogged slightly from the warmth inside, trying to push back the chill outside. And Isabel Hartley, she showed up at 4:58 a.m. just like she always did. She wore the same blue apron, carried the same keychain with the chipped metal heart, flipped on the lights, turned the open sign around, clicked on the griddle. It was routine, steady, familiar. That's what she liked most about it, how nothing ever changed. But something had it, she just didn't know it yet, not until she reached for the blinds to open them and paused outside the window. Beyond the condensation and the early haze of morning, there was movement, figures still quiet, lined up shoulder to shoulder across the sidewalk and stretching out beyond where the eye could see. Isabel stepped back, blinking. At first, she thought there had been an accident, a utility crew, a protest, maybe. But no one held signs, no one moved, just silence in uniforms. Some wore full dress blues, others had simple field jackets, a few were in civilian clothes, but all of them stood the same way, hands behind their backs, posture straight, eyes forward. Marines. Could this be the moment her courage is honored? She opened the door slowly, the bell above it jingling just like it always did, but this time it sounded louder, sharper, like it echoed a little longer than usual. The first man stepped inside. He looked older, his temples were gray, his voice low, calm. Steadied. Black coffee, he said. Then after a pause, you don't remember me, do you? Isabel tilted her head, the voice stirred something. He smiled faintly. Major Carter Brooks, Echo 12, you dragged me out of a burning vehicle outside Phobe. Courage. Her breath caught, she hadn't heard that name in over a decade. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small green bundle, cloth carefully folded. Set it on the counter. I'm not here for breakfast, he said. I'm here to return something. Inside the bundle was a worn metal medallion. Echo 12, dulled by time and sand. We've been looking for you, he said. A private recognized your face in a photo. Still working, still bandaging others, even with burns on your own arm. Isabel didn't speak, couldn't. Tears welled up before she could stop them. She nodded just once. Outside, the line hadn't moved fast, but one by one, they came, each of them holding something, a coin, a patch, a letter, a piece of their past, a piece of hers. One Marine, young, with a prosthetic leg, stepped forward quietly. You probably don't remember me, he said, placing a small token into her hand. But I remember you. You held pressure on my leg when I was bleeding out. You cracked a joke, something dumb about a camel and a sandwich, and I laughed. He swallowed hard. That laugh kept me alive. Isabel tried to respond, but nothing came. Only a breath, shaky, grateful. An older man, maybe late 50s, handed her a folded letter. His voice cracked as he spoke. My son was in that convoy, one of the ones you pulled from the wreck. He's got 3 kids now. They wouldn't be here if it weren't for you. By 9 a.m., the line still hadn't ended, and by 10, the local news had shown up. Someone had filmed the moment Major Brooks handed her the medallion, and the video spread fast. Caption simply, she was mocked yesterday. Today, the Marines came for her. More came, veterans from neighboring towns, then from across the state. Families of the fallen, some left folded flags, some brought framed photos, some just came to see her in person to say what had never been said before. Thank you for not hesitating, thank you for choosing the fire. At one point, a man entered with a little girl by his side. She looked about 9, clutching a paper drawing with both hands. She wanted to give you something, the man said gently. The girl stepped forward. In crayon and markers, she had drawn a woman with a cape carrying someone out of a burning truck. The woman's face was lined with faint red marks like scars, but the smile was strong, the eyes were kind, and above it, written in blocky kid letters, my hero. Isabel took the picture with trembling hands, and for the first time that day she cried. Not a sob, not loud, just a silent breath, and the kind of tears that come from a place deeper than words. By the end of the shift, the diner was filled with tokens of gratitude. The donation jar, usually half full of quarters and singles, overflowed with bills and folded notes. No one mentioned the men from the day before. They didn't need to. This wasn't about revenge, it was about remembrance, and for the first time in a very long time, Isabel Hartley wasn't invisible. She wasn't just the scarred waitress behind the counter. She was something more, something seen, something honored, and the world had begun to remember her, not for what had happened to her, but for what she chose to do anyway. The story didn't stop with the video. Within hours, national media picked it up, then cable news, then talk shows, not because Isabel Hartley had asked for attention, but because somehow something about her silence spoke louder than all the noise around her. Headlines appeared across the country. She served in silence. Now the Marines are lining up to thank her. Diner waitress turned hero. The woman behind the scars. She said one sentence and the nation stopped to listen. Calls came in from New York, D.C., even overseas, but Isabel didn't change her shift, didn't leave town, didn't give interviews. She just kept showing up at 5 a.m., just kept tying her apron the same way, wiping the same counter, pouring the same coffee. But everything else had changed. 2 days after the Marines came, the front bell jingled again. 3 men entered, suits, pressed collars. But no arrogance this time. It was them, the same 3 who had laughed, sneered, reduced her scars to a punchline. Now they looked smaller. The leader, the one who had mocked her the loudest, held his hat in both hands, kept twisting it like he didn't know what to do with them. The diner hushed, chairs stopped squeaking, spoons hung midair. Even the jukebox for once seemed to hold its breath. Isabel stood behind the counter, wiping a glass dry, comb expression unreadable. The man cleared his throat. I came to say I'm sorry, he said quietly. I judged you without knowing a thing about you, without knowing what you'd done, what you carried. His voice cracked, the room stayed silent. Isabel didn't move, she didn't speak. Instead, she walked over to the donation jar on the counter, the same one overflowing now with bills and folded notes and handwritten thank yous, and with the gentlest tap of her fingers, she touched the rim, tapped just once, then looked up, met his eyes. That was her answer, not a grudge, not a performance, just recognition, a nod that said, "I see that you've changed, now carry it forward." The man's face crumpled, he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded stack of bills, and slid them into the jar. No words, no need. He turned and all three of them walked out, heads bowed behind them. The diner slowly exhaled, plates clinked, coffee poured, but it was softer now, warmer. That night, Margaret Benson leaned in the kitchen doorway, watching Isabel restock sugar containers like nothing had happened. "You could have kept that money, you know," she said. "Lord knows you earned every penny of it." Isabel just smiled, not the tight, careful smile she'd worn for years, but a real one, a full one, one that reached her eyes. "No," she said quietly, "it doesn't belong to me, it belongs to everyone who still believes in a better world." And somehow that belief caught on. Could this act of grace inspire a lasting change? By the end of the week, changes rippled far beyond the walls of Mabel's diner. A small sign appeared in the high school counselor's office, "Respect all scars seen and unseen," at the local DA clinic. A photo of Isabel now hung above the reception desk. It showed her pouring coffee, one hand on a battered mug, the other reaching for a plate below it. A simple plaque, "Courage isn't always loud." Other shops followed, window decals popped up, veteran friendly, scar friendly, human friendly. No one mandated it, no one made it official, it just happened, because kindness, when lived loudly enough, doesn't need instructions, it just needs someone to go first. Mabel's diner slowly transformed. No longer just a pit stop on Highway 12, it became a haven, a safe place, a quiet anchor for people carrying stories too heavy to say aloud. Veterans came in from other counties just to see her, to sit where the others had sat, to shake her hand, to say, "We heard." And Isabel, she didn't need applause, she just kept pouring coffee, listening when someone needed to talk, offering a steady hand when words didn't come. And in time, people stopped seeing her scars and started seeing her light, the kind that only exists when someone walks through fire and chooses not to burn others, but to warm them instead. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, no return address, just her name, written in careful block letters, to Isabel Hartley. Inside, a single invitation embossed in gold, formal: "The Marine veterans of Echo 12 cordially invite you to a ceremony of honor and recognition of service, courage, and unseen sacrifice, Saturday, 6 p.m., Millersville VFW Hall." Isabel held it in both hands for a long time, didn't move, didn't speak. She'd faced mortar fire, pulled wounded men out of flames, walked into chaos without blinking, but this made her palms sweat. The next morning, the phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. She almost let it go to voicemail, but didn't. Isabel, came the voice on the other end, deep and calm. "This is Carter Brooks, Major Brooks, Echo 12, the man she pulled from burning steel and shrapnel all those years ago. I know crowds aren't your thing," he said gently, "but this isn't about a crowd." He paused. "This is your family and they'd like to see you again." Isabel didn't answer right away, but when she finally did, her voice was clear. "I'll be there." The VFW hall wasn't fancy: red brick walls, faded flags, a few creaky chairs, but that night, it might as well have been Arlington. By 6 p.m., the room was full of veterans in dress blues, families in Sunday best, children clinging to flag-folded memory books, and when Isabel stepped through the doors, the entire room rose to its feet. Every chair, every hand, every eye, standing not out of politeness, but reverence. Her steps faltered until Margaret Benson appeared at her side, quiet as always, whispering, "Go on, honey, they've been waiting a long time." Major Brooks met her halfway down the aisle. He took the mic, his voice didn't need volume, but it had presence. "For 7 years we searched," he said. "She disappeared after her medical discharge, no address, no interviews, no parade. Some of us thought she'd passed, others feared she wanted to be forgotten." He looked toward her, "But the truth is she never disappeared. She rebuilt, she healed quietly, she gave dignity without ever demanding it in return." One by one, they came forward. A father of 3, his life saved in Fallujah. He held up a photo of his kids. "These," he said, "are only here because she didn't stop." A nurse once just a terrified young corporal. "I became a medic," she said, "because I watched her hands hold a life together while her own arm was on fire." A retired colonel stepped up next. "She didn't just save bodies," he said. "She saved our hope." Then it was Isabel's turn. She stood at the podium, hands calm, eyes steady, and for the first time in her life, she spoke to the room not as someone hiding behind silence, but as someone stepping fully into it. "I never thought I'd stand at a microphone again," she began. "I never thought anyone needed to hear from me." She looked down for just a moment, then back up. "These scars," she said, touching her jaw softly, "aren't the marks of tragedy, they are proof that when the Fire came, I moved forward, not because I wasn't afraid, but because I was, and I chose to act anyway. Silence followed, the kind that holds, the kind that honors, and then applause, not loud, but steady, like a heartbeat. Finding rhythm again toward the end of the night, a young Marine stepped forward, dressed in his best uniform. In his arms, a small boy, maybe 3 or 4 years old, clutching a miniature American flag. The Marine cleared his throat. "We named him Thomas Isabel," he said, voice cracking. "So he'd always remember what real courage looks like." Isabel smiled, not the shy smile of a waitress behind a counter, but the full radiant smile of someone finally seen. She reached out and touched the boy's tiny hand, and in that moment, she knew she wasn't just being thanked, she was being carried forward. The weeks that followed were quiet, but never the same. At Mabel's diner, there were always new faces, veterans passing through, young soldiers on their way to deployment, widows who just wanted a place to feel remembered. And Isabel, she kept showing up, same apron, same early mornings, same quiet strength. But now when she poured coffee, people looked up, people saw her, not as a woman with scars, but as a living symbol of fire survived, of dignity reclaimed, of what it means to walk through the dark and keep the light. Anyway, in the end, she never chased applause, she never asked for anyone's attention, she just chose not to disappear, and in doing so, she became the kind of story that doesn't end, it gets retold. In every classroom that posts a sign saying, "Respect all scars," in every diner that leaves a seat open for a veteran, in every child who points at a woman like Isabel and says she's the brave one because she is, and now the world remembers her name, Isabel Hartley, the one who walked into the fire and never looked back. In our darkest moments, kindness still finds a way, often in the quietest places. Not everyone who helps wants recognition, some just need to know that today someone isn't going hungry, and sometimes that alone is enough to change a life. You may forget the story, but if no one retells it, history stays silent forever. Subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories, where justice is honored, kindness is remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.